Alex here with a high conflict child custody video. Let's wait for the plane. Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on splitting the stimulus check. And I'm not just talking about this year, it can be any stimulus check or anything that's similar that is just given to people as free money in the future. I actually had no intention of covering this video, but it's getting so ridiculous and it's popping up on social media on or in groups that have nothing to do with the Proper Person channel. I've just decided to do a video on it. So there's two versions of this dispute. One of them is really egregious and obviously wrong, and the other one, I guess I can see where the parent is coming from, but at the same time, I really wish they would put themselves in the shoes of the other person and think of how they would feel if this is how they were treated, which I understand is difficult for a lot of people, especially people in these cases where they are really at a state where they can't despise their ex, and their brain sort of just comes up with all these justifying reasons as to why they should just keep all the money. In any event, let's start with the most egregious example. So there are some people who separated very recently, and I'm talking so recent that their last tax return, they filed a joint return. And so the stimulus money is going into a bank account that is not theirs anymore because they've split up. And because it's a joint return, a portion of that money has nothing to do with the kids. Nothing to do with the kids. A portion of that money is literally the other person. It's them because it's a joint return. I don't understand on what planet people can justify keeping all of that money, and I'm not sure why they would need to get advice. I mean, it's one thing when it's the money that applies because of the children, and we'll talk about that in the next portion of the video. But for those people who have this type of situation coming up, it's really too bad that the only thing you can do is maybe take him back to family court, file some kind of motion, and get that money turned over. Because I don't think that there's any basis for contempt where there's no court order. I can't imagine anyone has it written into their court order that a stimulus check has to be split. Back, even just a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was pretty rare that this kind of stuff would happen. And you know what? This is actually, I think, a sort of, I don't know if I want to say explanation. I guess you could say it's a signal maybe to you as to how not on the federal government's radar child custody issues are. I don't think that Congress had any clue how big of a deal this would turn out to be in child custody cases at all. They just probably just assumed most people were happily together, or they would just work it out on their own, which is not what's happening from what I'm seeing in these groups on Facebook and these other social media groups. It looks like it's an issue in maybe more than even half of the cases. And I think the reason why is because people are justifying to themselves keeping the money. They're claiming maybe that the other person owes them for this or that, or there's some other reason or something that wasn't paid, and so therefore they're not going to turn it over. Stuff like that's happening. Anyway, the most egregious example is, as I mentioned, the one where you have a couple that split up very recently, and where they had a joint return, and so their money for themselves, as in them, that the actual adult, got sent to the other person's bank account, and they just decided to keep it. Now there's the more, I guess you could say, arguable side, which is that the parent who gets the money for the children decides to keep the money. If you don't have some kind of court order that's requiring you to split tax returns, you might not be able to get any help. It's just going to come up to the judge and their random opinion and how they're going to exercise their discretion. If you want to know more about why that's a problem, watch my video on the topic discretion. If you actually do have a court order that requires taxes to be split, you probably won't be able to hold your ex in contempt, because they'll come up with a plausible explanation as to why they thought that they got to keep all that money. It's one of the most common tactics in the book. I call it playing dumb, where they know it's wrong, but they're going to go to court and they're going to play dumb. They're going to act like they don't know what's going on and they didn't know. So unfortunately, if you're going to hire an attorney, there goes all your stimulus money. You're going to end up probably getting that money back if you represent yourself, and that comes with a whole slew of challenges. But if you have some kind of agreement that requires you to split that tax money, you should be okay. You'll just have to go back to court like the rest of us. Luckily, the rest of the people on the channel, I'm done. My case is completely and totally over. It's closed. That's a statement that I've read probably 200, 300 times by now with my docket series. In any event, you'll probably have to go back to court. I doubt that contempt is going to help anyone. And then you're just going to have to file just a generic motion out of the blue and try and get that money back. If you don't have an order that requires taxes to be split, the other person's probably going to get away with it. They're just going to say, hey, I've been able to claim the kids since forever, and this is just money for the kids that I get to keep. You might be able to try and get maybe a portion of it applied to child support, especially if you got furloughed or something. You may be able to say that there's something that supports that in the law, maybe child support deviations or something like that, where you're not really asking for the money to go into your pocket, but you're trying to say, hey, I got furloughed, I lost my job. That would be really nice if that could count as, my child support payments or something like that. That's probably the best you're going to get. If you want to learn more about how to have your ex forced to split those tax returns with you, watch my video on the topic Form 8332. I talk about it in that video. I think I've kind of covered all of the bases here when it comes to this particular issue. The only thing I can say is, if this was my case, let's say this was my case, and I was still in the middle of this, and you know what? I'll even say, I'm gonna say, let's say this was my case, and I had primary physical custody, and my ex only had visitation rights, and her visitation was suspended. And let's go ahead and say that my portion of the money went into her account because of the issue of the filing jointly and stuff. What would she do? She would keep it. I would bet everything on 100% for sure. I could guarantee the outcome. I had primary physical custody. She had her rights suspended. She only had visitation rights, and my portion of the check went into her account. She would definitely 100% for sure keep every cent of that. That's just how high conflict child custody works. And I don't know what else to tell you guys except that hang in there. Hopefully you're able to get it back. You can post something down in the comments below if you'd like to talk about how this is going in your particular situation. But I think I've covered this video in every single possible way that I could, including using examples from my own case. So as with all my previous videos, guys, feel free to post any questions you have down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.